I would have to factor that into my assessment. And I think all that should be factored in right now as we determine, why was Charlie Kirk killed and by who?
And I agree with that. What I thought was interesting. Charlie was a friend of mine, and it still feels like I get punched in the gut anytime I think about it. Like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna accept what happened to him and believe what happened to him. What got me? Nobody even thought about looking at Iran. Nobody. Everything is Iran's fault, whether you're pro-Israel. It seems like their first instinct would have been, this was Iran, and this is a reason to get into a war with Iran. But you couldn't look into any foreign anything. And so my initial thought was, if Netanyahu was involved in this, and I do know stuff Charlie was talking about at the end of his life, and I do know any posts that I would write that he was liking, I do know what Charlie was thinking at the end of his life. And I just thought it was odd that nobody thought maybe Iran could have done this at all, because I felt like if you had opened up a case into foreign intervention, then you're looking at everything foreign. And they were worried that maybe if you looked at Iran in this case, you might find Israel. You might find something you're not supposed to find. It's just a very odd thing to be aligned with. If you're pro-Israel, then you believe without a doubt it was Tyler Robinson and nothing else. And it seems like maybe some of them could be like, well, maybe Iran was involved. Maybe. But it's completely shut out, that idea that Iran could have possibly been involved. And that to me is a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Because it wasn't that we were shut down from looking at one country in particular. We were just shut down. We were just told stop. Like, we've got our guy. And my point was like, hey man, like, if you got your guy, you got your guy. That's fine. We still need to see if this guy is tied to anything. So even when we were looking at Robinson himself to try and find if there was any foreign links, beyond a real cursory search, like, we weren't given the opportunity to go in depth to look for any foreign links, to look to see if he was tied to, any country out there. And that to me was, a giant red flag as to, hey, what's going on here? Why are we stopping? Why aren't we doing our due diligence? And then since I've come out, there's been a lot of people who, they want to believe that official narrative that have come out and they've, attacked me or anybody else who, questions the narrative. And to me, that's always a red flag. I think we learned that during COVID, like, whenever they're attacking the people who are asking very basic questions, there usually is something else there. Look, a lot of this is going to play out in court, but even what's going to play out in court, I don't think it's going to answer the broader question of, what were the factors that led to him being killed, who at the end of the day was pulling the strings behind that, because it's going to be so hyper-focused on Tyler Robinson. I hope we'll get some more information from the trial. But I would encourage people to, follow the advice of Charlie Kirk, which is never stop asking questions, because it's the only thing that keeps us free. I mean, look, we have enough data on our government right now, and I'm coming out of government to tell you this, like, we should not trust our government. We should continue to ask the questions. We should continue to have people look at every single hypothesis and not get offended when people ask questions and look at different hypotheses. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, until we can bring about some major reforms in the government, I'm happy to talk about those, we are going to be left with, a lot of people out there having to do independent research, independent investigations to get to the truth of not just Charlie Kirk, but basically everything that's taking place right now in our country, because there's just so much propaganda out there.
Hey, there you are.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. It happens. We're good. I was just talking about the NDAA on IRL last week. And as I was talking about it, I get locked out of my X account. And I haven't been locked out in 3 years. So yeah, we're just like, oh, something's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. And it's like, come on, we're barely like even live. We're in Riverside. It's like StreamYard. What is this? All right. So let's talk about, you said you would be interested in talking about some reforms that the government could make. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, certainly. In this administration, because of what happened in the first Trump administration, I think we put a huge emphasis on having people that were just loyal to President Trump. That became like the litmus test for getting people in office. And unfortunately, that kind of made us, I think, bypass some good candidates, probably from the government and the military, who they weren't partisan, but they wanted to serve. And that was replaced by people who were just like hardcore Trump loyalists. And then another mentality of having all Trump loyalists in one spot, that just kind of creates this echo chamber where the president can kind of do no wrong. And then the number one goal becomes to please the president. And that leads to not being able to give him very candid advice. And as a matter of fact, like if you go and you went and you gave President Trump candid advice, things that he maybe didn't want to hear, you quickly were not allowed to come into the next meeting, or you just weren't as popular. It just creates this really weird environment. So I think going forward, we've got to find a way to balance someone who's going to be loyal to the next president, because that's important. The president does need to have advisors that he can trust, but also at the same time, you need people who have the qualification and the experiences. And I'm not one that says we have to have, credentialed people from Washington, D.C., but if we're going to have real reforms, especially to the intelligence community, to the FBI, and to the military, we do need people who are familiar with those institutions, who, in my view, after 20 plus years of war, they should have some dirt under their fingernails. They should have some grit. They should have done some deployments. If they're going to be in charge of a bunch of guys who go out and, arrest people or go on raids, they should have done some of that themselves, or at least been around it in some capacity, so that they understand how these institutions work. And the more they understand these institutions, the less likely they are to be captured by them. We had a lot of people in the Trump administration who were very good at pointing out how these institutions were flawed on the outside. And then once they got on the inside, they were captured by the institutions, because these institutions are ran by professionals who are very good at capturing people and recruiting them, essentially saying like, okay, now you're the head of FBI, you're the head G-man, we'll take you to the FBI hostage rescue team's headquarters and we'll let you shoot on the range and watch the guys blow indoors. And now you're in charge of all these guys because, you're so badass. And that sidetracks the person who's supposed to reform the FBI, because now he's saying, well, this is my FBI and they're the greatest patriots ever. And he forgets all the reasons why we wanted to go after the FBI in the first place. Same thing with the CIA. You get a guy like Ratcliffe, who basically AIPAC is bragging about installing as the CIA director. Yeah, he was the DNI before. However, he's not an intelligence officer. And so you get professionals at the CIA, professional case officers, who basically recruit the guy. They play to his ego, and they say, well, now you're the spy master, you're in charge of covert action and all these different neat things. And they show him all the bells and whistles enough to be enamored with them. But then he makes no reforms whatsoever. He doesn't even fire anybody at the CIA. So we need, I think, a small cadre of people who understand these institutions and are willing to go in, strip away a lot of the trappings of prestige, having all these different assistants and all these different, personal drivers and security and all this stuff, all these mechanisms that are really just used to handle you, and go in there with a single-minded focus that we need real reforms, that we need to bring about a lot of accountability, we need to bring about a lot of transparency, and make that their goal, while at the same time keeping the American people safe. And so we need to have people who also don't really, want to run for office, people who maybe already have had their career. They don't need to tie their entire identity to being the director of this department or that department. So I think there's a lot we can do in the personnel space. But then also, above all that, you do need a president who is going to advocate for these changes. And we have to have a president that's going to be willing to go to war with a lot of these institutions inside Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, for a wide variety of reasons, we thought President Trump was that guy, but he just wasn't. I don't know if it's an age thing. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but he kind of lost his fight. We need someone who's going to just say, hey, every day I'm going to come in here and it's my job to bring accountability to the American people and transparency, and who stays with it and is willing to go to war with these institutions.